Hi guys, can everybody hear me?
It's Little Caesars Detroit style squares for just $4.99. Perfect for me, myself, and me again. It's your pizza on your time.
Wow. You can hear me. Good, because I was looking on my desktop and a commercial came on and I'm like, ah. All right, hi. It's good to see all of you guys. All right. I was trying to figure out some things technically and I thought this is going to be easy. I'm going to use my phone so I have kind of a higher resolution, and I spent like an hour wasting time. And then I tried my oh my goodness. Should have tried last night, but that's not what happened. Let me grab my book, because that was the next thing I had to do. And I thought I had it right with me. Oh, there it is. Yep. Crazy. I did. It must have fallen off my desk. Hello. Regina is your first name, right? Rock Budgets. It's good to see you. And it's good to see Kelly and Micah, as I'm saying that correct. I'm glad to see you from Utah. I'm glad to see all of you guys from all over. It's really awesome. But this is a book that I read most of. I can't say I finished all of it. But I read the parts that are going to work really well to tell you guys what this book is about and if it's the right book for you. So, all right. Yeah. In fact, Dana K. White wrote this book. It came out just recently, and it popped up when I went to get her other book, Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. So I snagged it. It came, pre-ordered it. It came, and I've been reading it. And the title, she's worried about what people are going to think about the title, because it says Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. He cares about your messy heart, because our hearts are messy too sometimes, right? But she didn't say messy heart. He cares about your heart. Your heart is what is important here. And if that's the only thing you read from that book and you take that and grab that and understand it, that's a good thing. If you're not Christian and you're not sure that, this book is for you, I think it still has some good things to offer, because a lot of the values that our society is built on is Christian. There's another great book by Tom Holland called Dominion. That's a history book about how thinking it's in our society, whether whether we're religious or not. But so she starts out with that phrase that we all have sometimes heard, and maybe we've believed, maybe we haven't believed it, but it's this phrase, cleanliness is next to godliness. That's a phrase that many people often think about or hear. She was curious about where this phrase was from. It wasn't in the Bible. She thought, maybe it's Shakespeare, because a lot of times some little phrases that Shakespeare said, because it's in the same language as the King James version of the Bible, people might mistake for that. And it wasn't Shakespeare. It was actually John Wesley, who was a preacher in colonial America. and it was in one of his sermons. And I mean, it's it's an older idea. He didn't get this out of thin air, but that's where the phrase came from. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Uh, and so she's like, whew, I can, coming from that early Christian preacher in the colonial U.S., she was like, oh, it actually came from that, but that doesn't mean that it's necessary. A lot of people held on to that. That's why it lasted for so long. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So that was one thing that a lot, and she thought about that. Why would we think that that is so important? Maybe because we have some. There's another verse, and now I forget where she quoted it because I've heard this verse a lot as a Latter-day Saint, and that is God is a God of order. So we need to keep our houses in order. Have any of you guys heard that? And so that's the thing. That's why uh, we have to keep our houses clean, and that's why it's important, that it is a moral thing. And a lot of us feel like we are not good people, or we are not worthy if our houses aren't clean. We want to hide it all, right? And we're embarrassed. And the interesting thing about that is she said, actually, if we let our houses stop us from helping other people, for instance, inviting someone in who needs safety or shelter or just someone to talk to, if we're too embarrassed to let them into our house because of our mess, that's the problem. That's pride. And I don't know how much, if we're worried about our appearances to other people and we let that stop us from helping someone else, that's where the moral and ethical failing is. So that was one thing. There is a lot of shame. There really is. But I think we need to understand our hearts as well. And we need to understand that God loves us regardless. And if you're not religious or you're agnostic, I'm not sure exactly how I would be able to put that in those terms. I tried to think about that. But people are good, and our goodness is not, measured by how perfectly we keep our house. And I think that's true across the board. So you just have to give some grace to yourself and give grace to other people. Because if we have looked at someone else's house and we're like, and here's the thing, we're used to our own homes, and clutter blindness is a problem. And she described it very well. I clean up the table, for instance, and a small piece of paper gets on there, and that's not messy. And I don't see it. I forget about it, and then something else gets on there and it's still clean, and that's not messy. But pretty soon enough stuff gets on there that now we've got a mess that is also now overwhelming. Just because we're not we may care, but if we're doing so many things, we're not thinking about it. And in our head we said that table's clean, but suddenly once we realize it's not, it's usually a little more than one or two pieces of paper, right? So yeah, clutter begets more clutter. That is so true. Um, and And so here's the question, and this is even a question that I heard in my ethics and moral class um, in college. What is your intention? Did you not clean that up because you saw that and thought, oh, somebody else is going to get that. I don't want to get that. And that would be selfishness. And that is also something that, selfishness isn't good, right? But our homes are not usually messy because we're selfish. Let's see, I think I looked it up right in there. Um, Laziness, just not wanting to work. I think that is also more closely related to selfishness. So God doesn't care about your mess if what's going on. God doesn't care about your mess. He cares about your heart, is what she's saying. So if what we're doing is going along, we're busy because we've dropped that piece of paper and we're just continuing on our way. Um, but we haven't been selfish. We haven't been lazy. We, you know, haven't been, and we care about how our house is helping our family, how it is for other people. And I think that is true for all of us, right? We would all help anybody in a pinch. And that's why, when you know, do any of you have a best friend that they wouldn't care at all what your house looked like? You feel completely comfortable bringing them in the house. They've seen all the time. Their house is like that, maybe, but regardless, a friend that you totally trust, your spouse, hopefully, that you totally trust. Um, uh, the Lord is loves you like that and more and better and understands you better than anybody else. He understands you better than we understand ourselves. Um, in our hearts and homes. The saying, um, right? We have acquaintances, but we don't. Right, Micah? We don't have friends that we couldn't trust. Um, and we have a lot of acquaintances. We have um, people that we might be afraid to let into our homes, but if they needed your help right then and there, she Dana had a really, really great story. They had just gone on a trip. They were out, in the airport, and got word that her mother-in-law had um, fallen in the nursing home and, had probably passed away, but they were an hour away and their home is somewhere else. And so they went straight to the hospital, and she'd passed away basically. And so friends and family were gathering at Dana's house, at her house. And she had just left on a trip and she had gotten things packed and, hadn't cleaned up, hadn't been expecting any company at all. But the important thing about that moment wasn't what her house was like. It was how she was welcoming others when she had sisters-in-laws and family and who, came into her house while they were at the hospital, and there was an emergency with her son at the same time. So it actually took a little while. And she walked in the house, and that first instinct was to be embarrassed and want to clean things up in front of other people. Not just in front of other people, but clean things up, apologize and talk about this. And she stopped, and she felt like this moment is for all of us to be together, comforting each other, grieving together about her mother-in-law who had passed away. And Um, it's not about what her house looks like. So she just clammed it all shut and let that happen. And nobody was there judging her. They just were getting, the shelter of her home, uh, all together, the comfort of each other in her home. And it didn't matter what her home had looked like. The people got what they needed in her home. And so that, for me, is like, you're right. Uh, Talking to the book. um, that what is more important here is how we appear, or is it um, what our heart wants us, what our heart is doing, what we're trying to do? Are we aligning ourselves with the goodness of God, with what He wants us to do to get a better relationship with other people and with Him? Because we know also we do judge ourselves so much. And I just want to get, here is, this has been on my mind a lot when I read this, and it's I guess a visualization that I have, and this is religious. This is um, me as a disciple of Jesus Christ. I think when I pass away and I'm standing in front of the Lord, in front of the Savior, is He going to ask me, did you put your makeup on? Did you wear, those most stylish clothes? Uh, is He going to ask me, is your house really clean? Or is He going to ask me, did you feed my sheep? Um, and I think it's going to be the latter. Now, sometimes if, making our appearance uh, look good within our culture, whatever that happens to be, look not distracting, um, if that helps me feed His sheep, then that's a good thing. But if I'm worried about what people think about what I look like, if I'm worried about what people think about the appearance of my house, that is leading me away from the purpose to create good in the world. And so, that was most of the first part of her book. Um, she wants us to, some people might think that uh, those of us who have messy homes don't care. And she has something to say to that. If you cared enough to read this book, or I would say watch this video, um, because your messy house weighs on your mind, you already know everything someone could tell you about why a clean house is a good thing, right? We already probably know that it feels more peaceful in our home when it's all clean, that it's easier to do things when it's all clean, that, all the things, uh, that when we cook in a clean kitchen and everything, that, we don't have germs that are bothersome. You guys know that I have my allergies, that if I don't keep things vacuumed and picked up, those bother me. We all know why we need it. So we care. But sometimes people might tell us that we need to have a clean home. Um, and we don't need to be told that, right? That's not helpful to hear things like God is a God of order. We know that, right? Um, so she's also talking about some people that might say the things that will make us feel shame. And you know what? We're already saying that to ourselves, is basically what she's saying. Um, let's see. What was the other thing I wanted? Okay. This is the other thing I wanted to talk about. She talks about the kinds of things that might be part of our makeup, meaning part of, the way our brains work. Um, that makes us like uh, have this home that is difficult and challenging for us to manage. Um, she's creative. Dana is creative, um, and talks about clutter blindness. She has another word for it, but uh, she talks about wishing that God would just fix her so that she could effortlessly or easily keep her house clean so that so that she automatically got it. She's like, oh, I get this, I can do this now, it's easy. She wanted God to just fix her because she felt like this was a problem in herself, and she kept on praying for that and kept on praying for that. She's a writer, and I don't know if you know her story. um but uh, she knew that it would be good for her, and she wanted her house clean, but it was really hard for her to figure it out. She would clean up her whole house really well, and pretty soon it would all come back. Um, and yeah, she wanted that fixed. Instead, she thought, I'm going to start a blog, and then I can practice my writing on my blog. And I've told you this in my other videos. And this took her a while because she's like, I will clean my whole house up and then I'll start the blog. And that was hard for her to do and continued being difficult for her to do. And she just felt like she had to start that blog. And she's like, okay, well, what am I going to write about? And she heard that little whisper, write about your messy house. And she really pushed against that, but then she did it. And that was her blog, A Slob Comes Clean, and she's been doing that for a lot of years now. She thought she would be judged, but instead, uh, she touched a lot of people. And I think a lot of us, so many of us from so many different walks of life, um, do have this challenge, and we judge ourselves. We feel judged. Um, and uh, when she opened up about that, people are like, this is how I feel. This is hard for me too. This is frustrating for me too. So she basically publicly and slowly figured out what worked for her. And that the reason that God did not just change her, fix her to make her clean, is because there were other people that needed their hearts touched. That story resonated me because, of my similar experience with, I've got to get this history blog going, and but I can't work in my house. It's too hard. And then the idea, turn your camera on. And so I feel a lot of kinship with her that way. Um, it's leading us slightly different directions. I really don't think I'm going to become a cleaning expert because other smart people have already figured it out, right? There's so many techniques. That's one other thing I wanted. Other smart people have figured it out. I think it's time we stop thinking of housework as instinctual and just it's easy to do, I think, and that it's just the kinds of things that just every normal people should just know how to do, right? And that is not true. As I have seen her and other authors uh, have tools and techniques to help people keep the clutter picked up, help people figure things out. We do need someone like Dana to say, there's a clutter threshold. Our houses can only hold so much. And if we try to put more in our houses than they can hold, then our house is going to become cluttered because we will be unable to manage it. Um, and we need people to figure that out because homemaking, housekeeping is not a simple task that people can do without needing to learn any skills. And in fact, they knew this at the turn of the 20th century in the 1900s. We had a big efficiency, um, you know, it was happening in the factories. How can we make these factories more efficient? How can we make the office work more efficient? And then women got on board with how can we make housekeeping more efficient? Um, so it was thought of we can apply science to housekeeping. And that was that, helped streamline some things, helped a lot of things become, you know, easier. Can we figure out a better way to dry our clothes, to hang our clothes up, a better way to cook? And like, if you read some of the early women's magazines from my church, Relief Society magazine, they were very proud of understanding the science of nutrition because nutrition was at that point not as well understood. The science of the engineering of our clothes. And so they were thinking of housekeeping in more terms like this. I think we can't take for granted how much work it is, how much executive functioning it takes, and uh, it's something that we all need to work on and figure out. And we can't just shove that to the side and say, that work is not very worthy, right? That work is not very interesting. That work doesn't change the world, and yet it has, actually. Um, Midwives knew how to keep things cleaner than doctors did, and that was just, their things need to be clean and orderly. Um, and so we cannot discount homemaking. And I know many people have said this before, but I'm going to stand up and say it again that this is very important work. That there that I am becoming a cleaning expert, but slowly. But I think other people are ahead of the game on that. I'm just following in their footsteps. Thank you, compassion. That's a sweet thing to say. Um, but I got distracted because that's what I do. I get distracted. Ooh, okay, here it is. Every event, and I've said this before, I think. I think I said it on my last live stream. I'll say it a lot, I think. But every event that has ever happened in this world happened in a place that had to be prepared, and usually there had to be food. It had to be clean. It had to be quiet and ready for someone to sign treaties or to figure out, do math works and figure out science things. All of these places had to be in a state where they could work. And that was homemaking. That was housekeeping. That was domestic work. There's nothing in this world that has not happened without someone first making a place for it to happen. And that's discounted a lot because, the treaties, the this. But we also all know that all these people grew up in spaces where they were taken care of. And we do not care very much for that kind of work in our society. Maybe us in our little group does, but our society needs to start realizing that that is where the real work is. Just because there was no historian writing about it, just because there was no newspaper article about it, or we didn't turn the TV cameras on it, and we are right now, and that's the beauty of having everybody being able to have a little camera and just point it wherever they want. Here's the camera I often use. You know, look at this technology that can help us record the history of how important the work we do is. Just because it didn't get recorded before doesn't mean that it was not um, integral. It was not a very important part of what happened back then. There's my rant. Anyway, the second half of this book. So the first half of this book is Dana telling us that it is our intentions that are more important. And that is what I learned in my ethics and morals class. We asked, is it, and we know that this is true because intentions are very important. If someone kills another person, if it was an accident, that is treated very differently than if someone intended to do that. So intentions are important to what we do, even in our secular world. And when we understand how our brain works, and we learn some of the techniques that some people who have had the same struggles, who have been working out how to make it work with their brain, we can stop saying the problem is me and just start saying, if I do it this way, this is the way I can do it. Because we all are going to have different ways of taking care of ourselves that are going to click. And for someone else, it might not work. But both people care and both people want to do the thing that makes their life and everybody else's life easier. Both people care about those around them. And that's the message that I wanted to get out today. The name of my live stream is Messiness is Not a Moral Failing. And that wasn't actually in this book. That was in the next book that I'm reading, which is Keeping House While Drowning. So that's the next book I'm going to be talking about. And I read this book and I was like, wow. She came at it from a totally different angle and is saying a lot of the same thing, but in a way that other people can understand too. Anybody have any questions, or we can just chat or something now? In the 50s, they gave way more importance to the homemaker. Somewhere along the line, they stopped teaching how to clean and organize. I think that is true to an extent. I think in the 50s, they also did not have as many things as we have. Like there were no little, all right, for instance, if you got milk, you got in the US and in some other places, you had your glass bottle and your milk was delivered to you from the dairy, and then you put out your empty glass bottle and it was refilled. And now we have milk jugs that we are responsible for throwing away. The reason why that is I just got my eye on this, it comes from work because it's very easy to acquire, and then we have to throw it away. And my husband is a lot like me. a lot like me, and, so we have more things we have to manage, um, and, women worked a lot in the '50s, they just didn't work outside of the home as much in the '50s. Also, the '50s, um, was when I forgot who wrote it. There was a book called The Feminine Mystique. What had happened was during World War II, a lot of women, my grandma was one of them, had taken the jobs that men had had, and they had been out, and it was interesting and stimulating. There were more things going on. Some of the passions and interests, that women had that aren't satisfied by working in the home, and also the socializing that is not necessarily satisfied by work at the home, sometimes it is. That, was something that women had they're like, "Oh, this is fun, this is cool." When World War II ended, a lot of these women the men took back a lot of the jobs, or they weren't necessary anymore. My grandma was building warships up in Seattle, Washington, um, Navy for the Navy, and a lot of women were. That's where you get the Rosie the Riveter thing, is they were recruiting women to do that. But when the war was over, they came back home, and there was another thing that happened. And, um and, we had the, Soviet Union and America. And the Soviet Union, the women in the Soviet Union, they also held jobs outside of the home, and the Soviet Union decided that maybe the state should raise the children. They backed away a little bit from that and started giving women better maternity leave than we have ever had in the United States. But, um, they still the women worked, and Vladimir, my husband, was raised in the Soviet Union. And what happened is that they created an economy that required both parents to work to even be able to live, to afford the things that you get. Because even though the government provided, a house for you, you had a little bit to pay in its upkeep, and you had to buy food, and you had to get the things that you needed. And when, his mother kicked his father out because of abuse, and she became a single parent, and it didn't hardly really matter why you were a single parent. Divorce was even more taboo in the Soviet Union than it was in the United States. And when she did that, A, just socially, the people around her didn't take care of her very much. B, there were no social programs to help out a single mother, regardless of why she was single. And so, by creating this, economy where both parents were required to work just to get by, women had to work. And the United States said, "Oh, we are more affluent, and we only need the man to work, and the woman can stay home and take care of the children." And that was thought of as a, um, pa- uh, the American way. It was patriotic. The men work and the women stay at home, and that's what a good American does. Um, so within all women having been at work and feeling fulfilled at work, coming home now and having to stay at home, and this whole little, our brains can do the same things. And there was a lot of misogyny back then too. So it was both. There was a lot of misogyny in the Soviet Union, but there was other things going on there. But in the US, in this particular atmosphere, uh, now I can't. Betty Friedman, that's her name, wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique, and you may have heard about it. And it was a feminist awakening, but it was a feminist awakening in a way that, um, really discounted the work that people do at home. Um, because, it can be not exciting, right? Um, and doing these things that aren't necessarily intellectually fulfilling, or, and we have never finished, you have to do it every day over and over again, can get frustrating. And a lot of women were being put on like Valium and stuff like that. You've probably heard of that. Um, but that was that was very hard for women, and that started what we had second wave feminism in the 1970s in the United States. That's what we call it, second wave feminism, which discounted the work at home. It said women, um, when you say the phrase women are capable of so much more than that, what you're saying is that is not very important work. That's like not work that should be celebrated. I We're pushing against that right now. I think that's why we have a lot of interest in domesticity right now. We're starting to realize that that work is very important. It should be People should be recognized for doing these care tasks in the home. Obviously, we're not doing it to be recognized, but we should recognize that it's uh, it's not, how do I want to say, it's not lesser work than anything that anybody else does. Uh, Let me. They did. So yeah, Kelly, that's the story why they stopped teaching how to clean and organize, because they thought it was not important. Women also didn't work as much in the 50s, right? Um, it's not a bad thing, Linda. You're saying to renew our minds and to love each other by taking care of each other and washing, folding, and putting my husband's clothes in one way. It is. That's how we show that we love the people around us. It is a work of love. It is a work of caring. It is a work of nurturing, which is another thing when we look in our society. All the work that has to do with caring and nurturing is not as well, not paid as well, not thought of as well as other more interesting works, like uh, banking, or, making lots of money, or inventing or engineering. It's not as celebrated when, like doctors. If you get a primary care physician, that is your regular doctor that you usually go to, and he's not a specialist. All he has to do is care about all the little things that you need to see a doctor for. Maybe if you have an ear infection, or if you have just, these minor health things that are easy to fix, but you need a little bit of a doctor's care, you go to a primary care physician. Those are the lowest paid and the worst thought of doctors, but they're the doctors we actually need the most. Teachers care for and nurture and teach children. How well are they paid? How well are they listened to? I have noticed that all of the professions that have to do with caring and taking care of other people are, um, they're works of love. People who go into those professions do it because they love people, not because they're going to get paid well. Um, right. The women who went to work outside of the home, as especially, and we're getting a little better maybe today, where we're starting to have men do some of those works. We're not genderizing the tasks as much. And I'm even seeing it in commercials, which makes me happy. But yeah, they had to go outside of the home and they had to come into the home and do all the things that mothers and wives, homemakers have to do. And they did both, and burnout. That is a recipe for burnout. Yeah, so that's kind of the history of a little bit the culture of how we have viewed our domestic lives, and I think we need to give it a lot more credit than it's due, and I think we need to not feel, and also, doesn't shame stop us from doing things, right? It's a weird vicious cycle. The overwhelm can be the pile staring back at you like, "You didn't clean me up. How good are you?" You're just like, "Shush, shush, pile. I'm taking care of you now." Don't let shame hold you back. Anybody have any questions or ideas? I am so excited to see all of you here. It's amazing. It's been amazing. I didn't think I was going to start reading a whole bunch of books on uh, how to and the psychology around cleaning homes. So this is really another thing that I felt very um it's been a blessing to me, and I'm really grateful for it. I hope that I've been able to bless your lives also by just sharing with you the things that I've been learning about. I think the reason for be lazy for cleaning is that we are distracted by social media. Social media, you're very right. Social media can be very distracting. And the social media, the companies want us distracted because they want us to watch the advertisements which tell us to buy things, and the things end up in our homes, or buy solutions. Um, that's why there is, I don't know where that's out right now. I haven't watched the news, but there is a lawsuit in the United States against some of these because they are using known psychological techniques to keep people on. And it is bad for the mental health of a lot of people for so many reasons. And our young generation right now has been especially affected by it. It's distracting, it's damaging because we see all these pictures of beautiful houses before, or beautiful rooms, beautiful faces. Everything is so perfect and photoshopped. The images are manipulated. We look at that and say, why isn't our life like that? And that is a fake life. We used to have to go buy a magazine in the United States. The magazine where I was at was called Better Homes and Gardens. And so we used to say, well, my house is not a Better Homes and Gardens house. It's a working kitchen, not a fancy display kitchen. But now we don't have to go buy a magazine for that. We can just pick up our phone and there it is. And there's a lot more of it than there used to be. And so, we need to give ourselves some tools so that the distraction doesn't stop us from what we need to be doing. And B, not let those things make us feel bad about our homes. Mm. Procrastination is also another good reason. In my last video, when I was talking about my upstairs and I said procrastination is too much foresight, I was thinking, I had to look at the mess and think about it and think, oh, I'll do that later. And then I'm not even thinking about it. So, but then I started procrastinating about it. I think there's like maybe levels of procrastination. I don't know. I'm not thinking about it at all because I think that it's good. It's all good. I just cleaned that up. Wait, when did I? Oh my goodness, it's not good anymore, is it? You know. Linda, my mother was a very smart lady. She told us we needed to help keep our floors clean at night because if we had a fire, we wouldn't be able to get out. So we cleaned the floor because she loved us. Oh, I like that. That is a really cool way of putting it. We cleaned the floor because she loved us. That's cool. Um, it's not working right now, but we used to have a working like robot vacuum, and we had to clean the floor because otherwise the robot vacuum would get stuck. And so we actually liked that it made us pick things up off the floor. Now we just vacuum ourselves, but we have the same effect in that room. We have to vacuum, pick everything up. And so when my dog sees us picking things up off the floor, he gets very, very excited because it means one of his favorite pastimes is going to happen. Well, that was it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, I'm here. If there's a book you want me to read, just drop it in the comments or in the chat, and I'll look it up because I'm really interested in how and what's being said about this topic too. You are all amazing, and I love how much you're talking to each other and helping each other out. And I feel very blessed to be able to meet all of you people who are doing my channel. Women mostly. Most of you are women, and it really is a privilege to get to know all of you. And you have affected me. I would not have started reading these books if you guys had not started mentioning people to read. So I really appreciate your help. Thank you. I didn't know how brave I was being when I put some of that out there, but I don't know. I think it's more important that we help each other out than that we hide what's there. Thank you again, everybody. You're amazing. Matt Paxton. I will write that down. Matt Paxton. Keep the memories, lose the stuff. Oh, I like that a lot. In fact, I have some things planned about, separating memories from stuff. So I will have to read that book before I talk about that. I'm sure he's said some really awesome things. Thank you, Matt. I am writing that down. Matt Paxton. I'm going to sign up. Again, I love all of you. You're amazing. God loves you too very much. And let him into your heart to know how much he cares about you. Bye.